Welcome to the Community Hotline, guys. For the community, by the community. I am your host, Mr. Bob Fang. And today we have special guest, Jeremy Holt. Hey.
Hey,
Why don't you introduce yourself, good sir?
my name is Jeremy Holt. I'm a writer. I publish comic books and graphic novels. And my day job, I do tech support. I work for Apple.
Tech support. Okay, look at you. Is Apple going to take over the world?
I actually, right now, I've worked for Apple in some capacity for the last 10 years. But for the last, I'd say, several years, 3 or 4, I've worked at a school. So I work at a middle school doing tech support, which is pretty fun to be around the kids.
Okay. You were at middle school doing what? Tech support?
Tech support? Yeah.
Well, let's jump into our first topic of the day, which is money. Tell us, what is money?
Money is the root of all problems.
You got a personal experience? A little elaboration on that?
Yeah, I think that for me, as someone who's in the arts, someone who does creative work, it took me a long time to understand that money doesn't secure my career. Like, you should never really go into something creative with the intent of making a lot of money, because, to be honest, that's not really the reality. And it took me 10 plus years of writing fiction to realize that at some point I had to stop and reprioritize what was important to me. And the work is the most important thing. Crafting these stories, providing representation in my stories so young readers can see themselves, not just having to imagine themselves in the story, but they literally see someone that looks like them. And to me, that's more important than making all the money. And having a day job, it affords me to just pursue my creative outlets without fear of paying rent.
I love that. What were you kind of like, 10 years ago before you had this kind of epiphany?
I was really, really focused on trying to become a full-time writer. And in order to do that, you have to obviously have a steady paycheck. And the reality in comics is you want to try to network, produce a body of work, but network so you can get work at either Marvel or DC, because they tend to pay really good rates. But after about 5 years of pursuing that, I almost gave up writing because I wasn't achieving those goals. And what I've come to realize is it's important to move the goalposts. It's important to pivot when you need to in order to keep that creative fire burning. Because if you focus on one thing, the reality is that's not going to happen, because it's just unlikely. And it's okay to change course. It's totally okay.
Okay. You got two money tips for the kids listening right now?
Pursue something that you're absolutely passionate about, that feels more like a reflex than a conscious decision, and explore your personal truths. And that's what's going to gravitate attention. And that's how, if you do say fiction, that's how readers are going to resonate with your work.
What are your 3 personal truths?
I no longer want to write about white male protagonists. I want to write about my own experiences as a genderqueer person, as someone who's non-binary. I want to explore those concepts, provide proper representation for anybody that is not white.
Anyone that's not white, I'll play a chord to that. Let's move on to the next topic, which is education. Tell us, who were you in high school?
I was the president of the art club. I did theater pretty late into high school. I only started theater junior year of high school, so I had a lot of work to do in order to earn my thespian pin. So what usually takes about 4 years, I was able to do in 2. And so I did a lot of acting and just running an art club.
Oh, wow. Okay. What about middle school then? Was there a big transition for you, like from?
Yes. So I'm a triplet. I have 2 triplet brothers that I grew up with. And as far back as I can remember, we believed we were going to be NBA superstars and played basketball day and night. I really wasn't good. I think I was passable, and I was a good teammate occasionally. But yeah, I think after we moved from Norway to Texas, I had this moment to reinvent myself, and I was like, I don't want to be an athlete. I don't want to be one of the Holt triplets. I wanted to be my own person, and I decided to do something my brothers couldn't do, which is get up on stage.
It's a flex, huh? You're like, I don't want to be in this triplet group no more. I love that. What's it like growing up in a triplet family?
It's interesting. I mean, I always had friends, so we moved a lot, and being a triplet was helpful in the sense that I always had somebody to hang out with. But I've struggled most of my life with just this crisis of identity. I'd say Chris and Justin are very close, closer with each other than I am with them. And that's a relationship I've been trying to build upon in the last, I'd say, 10 years. But I was just always trying to be my own person, viewed myself as an individual, wanted people to view me as an individual. So I've spent a great deal exploring that, both just in my life and my creative work.
When you mentioned that you had like a little identity crisis, can you like educate us on that? Like walk us through that? I'm sure like kids right now are probably going through like similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's and my brothers, it's a unique situation where we were born in Korea, adopted after a year, so we're not culturally Asian really in any way. I mean, I was raised by white people. As far as I'm concerned, I honestly view myself as white in a lot of ways. View myself as American in a lot of ways, and I've had this sort of internal crisis with it because I want to represent for people of color, but I'm coming from a very unique perspective because I don't have that culture to back me when I tell certain stories. So it's trying to find the balance of what feels authentic to me, what might resonate with people. Yeah, just kind of understanding that the experience is wholly my own and it's not right or wrong. But and I've met plenty of other Korean adoptees, so there's quite a few of us.
How does that work? Like when you hang out with like Asian people, what are some like usual questions like that are culturally Asian, I guess?
I don't have a lot of Asian friends. I live in Vermont, and there are no Asians here. There's very few people of color here. We all stick out like sore thumbs. But I did join the Korean Student Association in college because I wanted to try to like connect with that community, and it wasn't very successful because I don't speak Korean, and the meetings were in Korean.
Oh,
It's just like I don't know what's going on. And hanging out with predominantly Asians, I was then hyper aware that I'm Asian. It was very strange because I was hanging out with them and they'd ask who I knew in the KSA, and I was like, I don't know anyone. And then they stopped and they were like, well, who do you hang out with? I was like, and then this woman said, do you hang out with white people? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, and they started laughing and they were like asking me all these questions about it. Like I was hanging out with this like rare species of people or something. So it's been jarring and I don't know. I sadly I don't have a lot of Asian friends.
Do you like Asian food?
Love it.
Okay.
And yet, one of my best friends is is half Asian and we joke she just doesn't know how to use chopsticks. And I'm like, you can learn. She's like, no. I was like, I think that's called learned helplessness. I think you can learn.
Yes, learn how to cook. Psych 101, guys. What are two defining moments in your life and how did they impact you?
Mm. Deciding to pursue writing as a career was massive, and honestly, getting divorced that was massive too.
But okay, let's back up. Can we get a beginning, middle, and end on each of those?
I went to art school. I went to film school. I got a degree in sound design. It's kind of it's like a fake degree essentially because the industry doesn't care about where you went to school. And I did some good work. I worked at a post production sound studio in New York City. Interned there for a while. I didn't think creative pursuits was for me, so I ended up going into tech and I ended up working for Apple, getting certified as a technician. And after 4 years of that, I was like, oh, this isn't for me either. And I was like, I am a creative person. And then I kind of fell into rereading comic books thanks to my oldest brother. And then I just read a few series that really I gravitated towards, and then I decided I wanted to write. And so the moment I decided that was basically the Wall Street crash of '08, and I was broke. I was subsisting on like a bag of cashews for like 10 days. I was like, I can't go anywhere. I should just write. So that's what kind of sparked the whole thing. And then, yeah, and then I was just living life, working, writing, going on dates, and then I ended up meeting someone and then moving to Vermont, and it was for all the wrong reasons. And it took me several years to realize that. And then when I was like, oh, this is not for me, it was huge, pivotal for me.
I think just me personally, and then I'm sure if I feel this way, I feel other people have this question. But my only understanding of like a queer marriage is like Modern Family.
Sure.
So can you kind of walk us through that and like, educate us a little bit on.
Yeah. So when I got married, I did not identify as non-binary. I was, as far as I was concerned, as straight.
Married a girl.
Sorry.
You married a
Yes.
female.
Yes. And so it just wasn't right for so many reasons. And then it was kind of actually around the time I was deciding to get divorced, I was kind of reevaluating my life, and I realized a lot of the heteronormative behavior and the gender norms just weren't fitting me, and I felt like a square peg into a round hole situation. And then when I was interacting with friends who identify on the queer spectrum, having these conversations, and then I realized something that I was looking for a long time I'd found, which is that I don't really conform to gender norms. And embracing the gender identity of non-binary was really liberating. And I think for people who don't know, like there's a lot of misconceptions about being non-binary. This oversimplification is that it exists on a spectrum like most things. So I use they them pronouns, but not everybody who uses they them pronouns are non-binary, and not all non-binary people use they them pronouns. It's really up to the individual. So for me, I actually changed my pronouns maybe 4 months ago, but I've been out as non-binary for about almost 4 years now. So I was non-binary using he him for a while, but they them makes more sense to me. And yeah, for me, it's just kind of I'm more interested in the person. Gender is not really that important to me. If someone's just living their authentic self, that's all I care about.
Are you an air sign?
I don't know. A Capricorn? I don't know what that is in
Well,
relation to that question.
oh, I don't think Capricorns are air signs.
Okay.
I think they're fire signs. But anyways, don't quote me on that. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I guess so. That kind of gets me thinking. There's like this. There's this article on. I think it was on Vice. It was about like these specific like Chinese women who, because in Asian culture, marriage is like so ingrained into
Mhm.
it. There's like a specific term for a Chinese woman who marries a gay man, but
Cool.
doesn't know. I mean, they either know they're gay or they don't know they're gay, and they're trapped in this marriage, and they don't understand why their husband doesn't want to like be with them.
Wow.
So I guess, can you tell us about your experiences? Was there, why did you decide to get divorced? What was that, process like? Was
Sure.
it from a woman's point of view? What is it from your point of view? Did you guys have kids?
No kids, fortunately. I mean, to be very blunt, it was a emotionally and physically abusive marriage, and I have my own personal traumas that I experienced pretty early, like at 22. I am a survivor of sexual assault, and it's something I've written about. It's something I've explored in my work, but it's taken me a long time to realize that scenario did impact me in a really profound way, which I ignored for, I don't know, 12 plus years. Because of ignoring that, I now have come to realize that as a coping mechanism, as a survival technique, I just tried to be as agreeable as possible. I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to be confrontational. Conflict caused me a lot of anxiety. And so I ended up just going with the flow with a lot of things, which is how I ended up with someone who wasn't right for me, how I ended up uprooting myself from Brooklyn to Vermont for this person without thinking about how I felt. And it took me a long time to realize, wait, how do I feel about this stuff? Like, oh God, I have so much anxiety right now. Like, I should listen to this. And therapy helped a lot. And, understanding who I am and what I was neglecting about myself helped better inform me that, oh, this is all wrong. And, what this person's doing is all wrong. And it was unusual because of the gender swap in the scenario of domestic violence, where it's like, you know, I remember saying to a friend, explaining, yeah, I was sleeping and she hit me, like hit me in the face. And my friend said, well, how hard can women hit? I was like, that's not really the point. Because if a woman said that, like, oh, you got to call the cops. So it's that kind of stuff that's frustrating. And it was really challenging to navigate, especially living in a small town where we had so many mutual friends. But yeah, deciding to do that was the first time that I truly advocated for myself.
Mm.
And that just kind of sparked this whole new way of thinking where I want to try to live authentically and as gently as possible. And that, honestly, conflict's not necessarily always bad. Conflict is part of the human experience. I look at it now as kind of a gift, and it's a gift we all get to unwrap. And maybe the stuff inside is not something we want to unpack, but by doing so, we're learning about ourselves. So I kind of welcome conflict now whenever it arises.
So how long ago was this?
3 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago, got divorced.
So
Yeah.
so basically you're kind of just stabilizing like after the divorce. It's pretty fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I fell into two problematic relationships that I got out of last year. I was in one for 2 years, and then I ended that relationship because of various reasons. It just was not healthy, and I had to quarantine with my ex for about 4 months, which was really rough. Uh, and then I ended up in another relationship, and then over the summer of last year, and then I realized, you know what? After that, it was like eating too much of something you love to the point where you now are nauseated by it. It's like, yeah, dating is just building a relationship, just not for me. I need to just take some time to self-reflect and enjoy my solitude.
Got it. I love that. Okay. Well, I feel like, you're a changed man. So I'm glad to be talking to this new version and still be able to get the insights of old Jeremy. Let's move on to the last topic of the day, which is love. Some say it's the most important topic. Tell us, what is love?
Great question. I think love, as far as love for somebody else, like if you're in a relationship, to me, the cornerstone of what love means is you want that person to be happy, no matter what, even if that means it's not with you. Understanding that, I've reflected on all my serious relationships, and I realized I didn't, in fact, love many of these people for various reasons, unresolved trauma being a big part of it. But I think also it means holding space for yourself. I think we are always evolving, and if there's any advice I'd give to people about dating and finding a partner and all that is be comfortable with yourself, know yourself. Don't change for other people. Change for when you think it's right, and we are always going to change. So when you get into a relationship, hold space for yourself to change, for yourself to go on your healing journey, because we're healing from something always, but also hold space for your partner to also change. I think the commonality with all the relationships for me that failed was I was with people who held on to an idea of me at the beginning and never let that go. And as I transgressed those ideas, they felt conflicted and they weren't happy. And it's like, you can change the outward appearance, you can change your internal viewpoints on things. As long as they're not problematic in any way, I support you. And it's, again, just holding space.
Let's record for that wise wisdom. What is it? What's it like? Growing up in like a interracial family or like an adoptee family. Like, was there a lot of fighting over food growing up with your older sister?
Not a lot of fighting over food. I think my brother Chris, who I know you spoke to, he jokes. I think that the reason I think I, and maybe my brother Justin eat so fast is because we were always fighting for food. But I don't know if that's wholly accurate. But we grew up in a lot of international communities, so growing up in this interracial family wasn't odd. I would get asked at times in my life, like, about my parents and my adopted parents, and like, I'd be antagonized, like, those aren't your real parents, and it's like, says who? Like, as far as I'm concerned, they're my real parents. That I've never thought anything otherwise, and I think as an adoptee, having spoken to other adoptees, I think the difference is that I got to grow up with biological siblings, which, as a development process, I know as a child I was looking at people that I know didn't look like me, but then I turned to my left and right and saw siblings that did. So it was just like, oh, this all makes sense. And I think some adoptees have that conflict where it's like I look literally like nobody in my family, even to a close degree. I enjoyed being part of a big family, a lot of big personalities, and it's actually a great place to work out the things I've learned in therapy.
How would you Um, how would you navigate that? I guess I'm sure other people come from big families too. Are there any tips on how to keep the peace or get what you want better, or little tips on how to survive a big sibling?
That's a great question. I think as long as you don't have any serious trauma that you're dealing with, if you're not working from a traumatized or any kind of PTSD, um, I think just realize that we all tell ourselves stories. And this is a really good exercise to do with your family if they are willing to have the conversation. The problem is that when you leave home and then you have your life and you come back for the holidays and you see your family maybe once a year at the very least, the stories that they're telling themselves about you can only continue when they see you because they have no idea how to continue the story when you're gone. So
Mm.
what they're telling themselves is inherently old information because we are always changing. We are having new experiences. We're making new decisions for ourselves. So periodically check in with your family and say, okay, this is the story I'm telling myself about you. If you can you please update it for me? And I'd like to do the same for you. And so it's like, oh, I've been telling you only call me because of blank. It's like, oh, that's how you feel? Okay. And so having this open dialogue can be really connective. And, understanding that, yeah, maybe you're telling yourself a story about your sibling or your parents that you've been telling yourself for years and take time to reflect and go, is that still accurate?
Have you done this recently with one of your siblings?
Yeah. I did it about a year ago with my triplet brother, Justin.
Okay. Can you kind of give us a demo on how it goes? Is it just like exactly like word for word, like, hey, this is
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly what I just said. And then be prepared to hear something you may not want to hear and take a breath, take a beat, and really actively listen to what they're saying. And don't get defensive. Don't try to, you know, argue with them because what they're saying is their truth. Now
mm,
it may be old, but it's like, okay, this is an opportunity to have this open dialogue and say, okay, you're right. The last time I did call you, I did it because I needed something. But the reason I don't pick up the phone when you call me is because, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. And then it's like, well, moving forward, this is what I'd appreciate to see happen in our interactions. And he said, well, this is what I'd appreciate to see it happen in our interactions. And it's like, oh, okay. And just be mindful of it moving forward.
that's amazing advice. Who was your first love?
Oof. I'd have to say it's a girlfriend in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
That we're still friends with, which is
What
nice.
uh what was dating like in high school? Is it as an Asian man, I guess?
Uh, it was challenging.
Where'd you go to high school? In Texas?
No, well, I did 2 years in Texas and 2 years in Norway.
Okay.
It was challenging just because in Norway anyway, our class was so small. So it's like you kind of like it was very clear within weeks of the beginning of the school year who was going to date whom because it's like the attraction's there and it's like, oh, you missed the boat. It's like, oh, damn it. So it was unique.
That's how it is in Norway. Okay. What about in Texas?
Texas, there was a lot more ignorance, which was difficult to navigate sometimes. But because I was constantly hanging out with creative people, so I didn't have a girlfriend the last 2 years of high school. The first two, I was dating someone, but it was a long distance thing, and we were literally writing each other letters. That's right, handwritten letters to different countries. Um,
You got any I guess in my idea is, when did you realize, I guess you were queer?
I'd say a little over 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago. Um,
How was that? What was that like coming out to everyone? Is that a scary experience or?
okay, that's a great question. I think if anybody is thinking about it, really assess your situation. Really assess like if you're living at home, depending on your parents say because you're not old enough to move out, and you don't think they might support you, you may not necessarily need to tell them. And that's not you being false to yourself or untrue to yourself. It's just out of necessity. For me, I've realized I don't have to tell everybody, especially when it comes to family. I'm willing to only tell the people I know who can support me. The ones I know who can't or struggle with it, what am I going to get out of it? I'm just going to get arguments. So it's not really worth it because it's not about them, it's about me. And I'm okay with them not knowing, or talk to them when I think that they can actually actively listen.
Who was the first person you told?
My youngest sister, who has been out and proud for over 10 years now. She's kind of been my role model in a lot of ways.
Okay, okay. I love that. Any I guess any did you think there was different, I guess, struggles that you went through in going to school internationally versus like kids today, like what they're going through today from what you're seeing?
I think I was lucky to go to international schools because honestly, it's a better education, generally speaking.
You hear
And,
that, Americans? International
and,
education.
and like, I was in expat community, so I was around a lot of Americans. So moving to Texas was just a culture shock. It truly was, and just trying to understand how to navigate that my first year living in the U.S. was challenging. But yeah, I mean, I value all the experiences. I can't really denounce any of them or say none of them were worth it because it all added up to something.
What about when you talking about that culture shock? I'm sure international students who are coming to the US now probably experience the same thing. What's like a 3-month plan? Like the first 90 days, how do you survive high school in a different country?
Man, that's a tough question because I didn't have the confidence to, I don't know, be outgoing. Like I was painfully shy in high school, even though I was doing theater. The theater component was getting me out of my shell, but it didn't get me out as far as I wanted to be. And then college, I didn't really progress that much. It wasn't until I moved to New York City that I just left the shell completely. I was like, I got to be a new person. I got to just be outgoing. I can't be a wallflower. So it's hard to say what I would have done in high school because social pressures are so high, and you want to fit in, and you don't want to be mocked, and you don't all these exterior things, external things that dictate your actions. Unfortunately, that may not have nothing to do with you personally. So it's kind of hard unless you're just inherently confident. Kudos to you.
Okay. Any last tips? Last 2 tips that you have for the
Don't be afraid to pursue something that gets you up in the morning.
and one more?
Build a self-care routine, especially now. Do a few things that recharge your internal battery and develop things that you like and things that you find have restorative properties for you. Stick to it at least once a week.
Love it. Well, there you have it, guys. Jeremy Holt. Before I forget, 88 Real Estate Media is looking to build the best Kung Fu school in the world. If you guys are interested in joining the oversight committee, please do send us a message. Any last words, Jeremy, before we head out?
Thanks for having me.
Okay, there we go.
Patience.